Hello, everybody. It's Kim Wilson, and I'm very energized by a fantastic week 2 on the financial journeys of refugees. And the comments keep pouring in. So do get a chance to look at our discussion board uh, and add to it. So what I'd like to do now is review this past week, the financial journeys aspect, and then a few highlights of what's coming up next week. So this past week, we looked at predominantly roots and financial journeys from Afghanistan and Syria through the Mediterranean and up into Denmark. But as you know, there are obviously many, many other routes. The one that interests me, of course, are the ones that go through Latin America. But to focus our discussion, we focused on some European routes. So here were some of our findings: that there are big differences between long-haul and unidirectional travel and short-haul multi-directional travel, meaning if you're going from Afghanistan to Germany, you're probably going in one direction for as much of that trip as is possible. You might be stopping along the way to work or to gather in other family members, but you're probably going to be moving in one direction, and how you store up and use your funds along the way looks a lot different from people that are going from Syria to Lebanon to Turkey and Egypt and back and forth in very short legs. Both of them, what they have in common is that they're perilous, they're dangerous. In many cases, people do prepare, though some did not have the chance. But if they could, they did, and often it was for a year and a half, sometimes a couple of months. They knew they would depart, they just didn't know exactly when. We also learned and discussed how women en route are often alone and that they're plentiful. And they're grouping and they're clustering together to protect themselves and to get information. And often they're part of split families. So they're following a daughter or an uncle, or they are simply split because one member of their family didn't have access to identity that was needed to cross a border and another did. If you didn't get a chance to read the field notes we posted, please do see the posted story of Sim and Sam. It's the very first note. It will give you a good taste of what it's like to be a woman crossing alone. We also learned that social media is a key way to obtain information. It doesn't replace friends and families. It enhances information that you would get from friends and family. And that depending on the source, it can be very trusted. And what we didn't discuss so much is that actually social media isn't always correct in terms of the information you do get. Again, if you want to take a look at the field notes, you'll see a very interesting story of a young man in Turkey who tries to use social media to access the informal systems and the formal systems there. And that your access to funds, to contacts with money, and your prospects for work increase based on your economic and social standing and education. If you have a good education, you're much more likely to be able to find work in a country of transit or a country of destination. You may find construction work, you might find more sophisticated work, but of course the more educated you are, this kind of goes without saying, the more access to income you have. And of course, naturally, the more you can pay for services, whether licit or illicit. We also teased out the differences between simple transfers and a growing underground sophistication of the Hawala and Fei Qin, or flying money systems in China. And that there's a variety of store and release, or you can call them escrow or bond type agents, and that they're springing up from countries of origin all the way to countries of destination. And these third-party agents are becoming increasingly important in helping people store up their funds in advance of a journey and accessing it along the way. And they do a service, which is pay smugglers directly based on the instructions of the journeyer. And we also saw that informal family systems, what has been posted on the discussion as mirror image, and it's the term we've sort of coined this week, work much like the Hawala system, but with key differences. These are systems of transfer between families. So you might have a family in Turkey and a family in Syria. They're all related, and they are back and forth making payments to each other. But unlike the professional hawala, or the hawala where people are doing it as a living, these families can leave members broke as they await settlement. So somebody may have paid out a lot of funds to somebody in Syria based on instructions from family back home, but they find themselves without funds. So it's a moneylender in a sense that is awaiting for their receivables. We also found that journey costs vary greatly based on the country of origin, the destination, and shifting political decisions. From one route alone, the Kabul to Greece, for example, we saw variations in 1,500 to 10,000. And then going deluxe to Germany via air was a different cost than walking and traveling across borders in the trunk of a car and a spare tire compartment of a bus. This seems obvious, but in fact, it's true that if you're going to go on foot or go in a car or a bus, you're paying a very different price for a very different kind of smuggling experience than you are if you can pay all up front, which people can and do. Regardless, you're talking about amassing funds before a journey that may be up to 80% of the journey's total cost to make that journey. And if you can't amass it, you're finding it somewhere along the way as you stop and work. But the price of smuggling, which often includes the price of forged documents and the actual price of tickets, etc., is your most expensive investment if you are a refugee or a migrant without papers. In addition to paying smugglers via hawalas or other prepaying them directly, people stored money on their own bodies. They stitched it into their clothes and secret pouches in their belongings, and robbery was a common worry and actually bore out to be a real concern during many of these trips. And lastly, there was a lively conversation about the fact that there just might not be a business case for banks to assist refugees. That in this climate of de-risking, which means banks are being pressured by international regulators and standard setting bodies to know their customer, what we call KYC, and they can't really know the customer because they're facing a barrage of forged documents, and it's hard to prove who anyone is. And frankly, it's just not an attractive group for banks. It's not where their center of gravity is, which are better off customers that have all the documents. So I don't think we can look to them anytime soon for a lot of help. That leaves money transfer agents and the informal system. And Germany, while attempting to be refugee and migrant friendly, and we saw that on the discussion board, how hard they're working at that as a country, they've lowered identity requirements and compliance requirements. But banks, in spite of this, have chosen to open the accounts under pressure from the government, but they're charging very high fees. So one wonders how accessible those are once you get to your country of destination. How really accessible are these accounts, or how affordable are they is probably a better word, once you get to a country of aspiration, in this case, Germany. So here are a few predictions. Formal options that are relevant to the needs of refugees and journeyers will continue to be unavailable. There is no business case for them. And that denying these populations formal options will only push management of people's financial journeys further underground and more firmly out of the sight of big data and regulators. So in a way, the regulators are regulating themselves out of a business to even regulate, because it's all going underground. And the rising competence of professional, meaning legal and illicit third-party players, such as the Hawala system, will grow, and technology will continue to help them. It will help their users shop for and access services, and it will help these actors improve their services. They do have a business case to keep going. First, their services are side businesses and support their primary businesses, which is typically trading. And secondly, they really don't bear the burden of regulation or taxation. And this allows them to be highly flexible and truly versatile in the services they offer. So now let's switch gears for this coming week. This week is called Digital at a Distance. And we have issued you a free Kindle book called Digital Humanitarians. And it's by Patrick Meyer, who is going to lead us through this week. And you'll see we're going to run it a little bit differently. He has a series of videos and readings for us to read, which I plan on doing tomorrow. And I'm going to be learning right alongside you. And my co-leader, Ignacio Mas, feels much the same way. We both read Patrick's books this summer and really enjoyed it. So we wanted to make sure that you got a copy, and that's thanks to the Digital Frontier Institute. So this week we're going to have Patrick, who is an internationally recognized expert and consultant on humanitarian technology and innovation, lead us through the week. Again, you'll get a copy of his book. If you haven't done so, please access your email to make sure that it's sitting there in your box. And this book has been praised by Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Oxford, the UN, Red Cross, World Bank, USAID, and many others. And this week we're going to be focusing on two main questions. How might the digital humanitarian network, and you'll see from his book what exactly that network looks like, support the response efforts to the refugee crisis in Europe? Again, we're focusing on Europe just to keep our conversation focused, but hopefully we can start thinking in the future how to generalize to other regions. And does robotics have a role to play in the response effort at large, meaning not just in the financial arena, but in general? So we really look forward to this week with Patrick. Thank you.